missing me by inches. For a second, I thought maybe Linda had finally learned to throw straight after 23 years of marriage. Then I saw the process server standing in the doorway of the country club banquet hall, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else on earth. "Sign here, Mr. Brennan," he said, his voice barely audible over the sudden silence that had swallowed the room. "My name is Robert Brennan. I'm 58 years old, and until about 30 seconds ago, I thought I was having the best night of my life. 35 years with Morrison & Clark accounting firm, the last 15 as senior partner. The retirement party was supposed to be my victory lap. Instead, it was turning into my funeral." I looked at Linda, my wife, standing there with her arms crossed and a smile on her face that would have made a shark nervous. Our two kids, Jennifer and Michael, were right behind her. Jennifer was 26, worked in marketing, and apparently had inherited her mother's talent for dramatic timing. Michael was 23, fresh out of business school, and currently giving me a slow clap that echoed through the silent ballroom. "Really?" I said, looking at the divorce papers in my hand. "You couldn't wait until tomorrow?" "Why wait?" Linda said, her voice dripping with something that might have been satisfaction or might have been expensive wine. "You've been married to that office for 2 decades anyway. I'm just making it official." My colleagues stood frozen around their tables, holding plates of rubber chicken and witnessing what was probably the most entertainment they'd had at a company party since Gerald from tax compliance got drunk and tried to photocopy his face at the Christmas party. I picked up a pen from the nearest table. The room held its breath. Even the waiters had stopped pretending to work. "You sure about this?" I asked Linda. "Never been more sure of anything in my life," she said. Jennifer laughed. Actually laughed. "About time, Dad. Maybe now you'll understand what it feels like to be discarded." That stung more than the divorce papers, if I'm being honest. I signed my name on the dotted line, my hand steadier than it had any right to be. Then I stood up, straightened my tie, and walked over to Linda. She flinched, just slightly. Good. I leaned in close and whispered in her ear, "You have no idea what you just did." Her smile faltered for just a second, but then it was back, and she was turning to leave with our children following behind her like ducklings following a particularly vindictive duck. The room stayed quiet for exactly 5 more seconds before the whisper started. I grabbed a full bottle of bourbon from the bar, tucked it under my arm, and walked out of my own retirement party with whatever dignity I had left wrapped around me like a cheap coat. 3 months. That's all it took for everything to come full circle. Let me back up a bit and tell you about the life I had built. See, everyone thought I was just some boring accountant who spent too much time at the office. They weren't completely wrong, but they weren't completely right either. I'd grown up in South Boston, son of a mechanic and a waitress, and I'd clawed my way through state college on scholarships and spite. Met Linda in my senior year. She was beautiful, ambitious, and came from money. Her parents hated me. I married her anyway, probably just to piss them off. For the first few years, things were good. We were young and broke and building something together. Then I made partner, then senior partner. The money started rolling in, and somewhere along the way, Linda stopped being my partner and started being my dependent. The kids grew up with every advantage I never had, and somehow that turned them into people I barely recognized. Jennifer blamed me for missing her dance recitals. Michael blamed me for not being at his basketball games. Linda blamed me for everything else. Nobody seemed to remember that all those recitals and games and everything else were paid for by the long hours I spent making sure the Hensworth Industry account didn't implode or that the Berkeley Group's taxes were cleaner than a hospital floor. But here's the thing nobody knew. When you're a senior partner at a firm like Morrison & Clark, you see things, you learn things. You become the keeper of secrets that could end careers, marriages, and in a few cases, freedom. I knew where everybody was buried because I'd helped dig half the graves. And I'd been very, very careful about my own finances. The apartment I moved into after the party was a deliberate choice. Small, modest, in a neighborhood that would make Linda's country club friends clutch their pearls. I wanted her to think she'd won. I wanted her to think she'd taken everything I had. The divorce settlement was finalized quickly. Linda got the house naturally, the big colonial in Brooklyn with the manicured lawn and the pool we never used. She got half of what she thought was my retirement account. She got the BMW. She got to keep her dignity and her narrative about the workaholic husband who never appreciated his family. I got my freedom and a secret that was worth more than everything she took combined. See, about 10 years ago, I'd done something very smart. I'd started noticing patterns in how our wealthier clients protected their assets. Not the illegal stuff, mind you. The perfectly legal, completely legitimate ways that rich people stay rich. And I'd started applying those same strategies to my own situation. Offshore accounts? Too obvious. Swiss banks? Too cliché. No, I'd done something much simpler. I'd invested in real estate through a series of LLCs that were buried so deep in paperwork that even a forensic accountant would need a map and a flashlight to find them. Properties in Montana, Idaho, Wyoming. Places where land was cheap and privacy was expensive. I'd spent 15 years quietly building a portfolio that was worth approximately $7 million. Linda's lawyers had found my retirement account, my savings, my checking. They'd found exactly what I'd wanted them to find. The rest, it might as well have been invisible. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about the first month after the divorce. I showed up at the apartment every night, heated up frozen dinners, watched baseball, and waited. Linda called once, 3 weeks in. Not to apologize, of course, to gloat. She'd already hired an interior designer to fix the house. She was planning a trip to Italy with her book club. Jennifer was moving back home to help her mother through this difficult time, which I suspected meant she'd lost her job and needed a free place to live. "You sound tired," Linda said, her voice oozing fake concern. "I'm fine," I said. "The kids and I were talking. We think you should know that we don't hate you. We just think you need to learn how to prioritize family." I almost laughed. Instead, I said, "That's very generous of you. We'd be willing to have dinner with you, once a month maybe, if you can make the time." "I'll check my schedule," I said, and hung up. That's when I allowed myself a smile. Because that same day, I'd received confirmation that the sale of my Wyoming property had gone through. 300 acres that I'd bought for pennies had just sold to a renewable energy company for an amount that would have made Linda's eyes water. Month 2 was when things started getting interesting. I'd been keeping tabs on my former family through a private investigator. Not because I was obsessed, but because knowing is always better than wondering. And what I learned was fascinating. Linda had been having an affair for 3 years with Derek Pearson, a divorced real estate agent who drove a Porsche he couldn't afford and wore enough cologne to choke a horse. She'd been planning the retirement party divorce for months, coordinating with the kids to make it as dramatic and humiliating as possible. The whole thing had been a performance, and I'd been the only one who didn't know my lines. Jennifer had lost her marketing job 6 months before the party. She'd been living off credit cards and Linda's money ever since. Michael had dropped out of business school after 1 semester but hadn't told anyone. He'd been pretending to go to classes while actually working part-time at a gym and gambling away his allowance on sports betting apps. My perfect family was a house of cards held together by my money and my absence. But here's what they didn't know. The house, the beautiful colonial in Brookline that Linda was so proud of, I'd never put it in both our names. It was in a trust that I'd established 20 years ago with very specific conditions. Linda had the right to live there as my spouse. The moment the divorce was finalized, that right evaporated. She had 60 days to vacate, according to the trust documents that her lawyers apparently never bothered to read carefully. The letter from my attorney arrived at the house on day 58.
I know because my PI sent me a photo of Linda opening it on her front porch. Even through the grainy image, I could see the color drain from her face. She called me 17 times that night. I didn't answer. Finally, she left a voicemail. "Robert, there's been some kind of mistake. Some confusion about the house. Call me back. This is urgent." I waited 3 days before calling back. When I did, I could hear the panic in her voice trying to hide anger. "Your lawyer says I need to move out. That's ridiculous. This is my house." "It's my house," I corrected gently. "Well, technically, it belongs to the Brennan Family Trust, which I control, but same difference." "You can't do this. I'll sue you. "You'll what, Linda? You already divorced me. The settlement's final. You got exactly what the court said you were entitled to. The house was never part of the marital assets because it was never in my name. It was always in the trust. Your lawyers should have caught that. I'm honestly surprised they didn't." The silence on the other end was beautiful.
"Where am I supposed to go?" she finally asked, and for the first time in years, she sounded small. "I don't know," I said. "Maybe Derek has room at his place. I hear his condo in Quincy is very nice. A little small for 3 people, but you'll manage." Another silence. "How did you know about Derek?" "Linda, I've known about Derek since the beginning. I'm an accountant. I notice patterns. Late charges on the credit card from that Italian restaurant you supposedly hate. Hotel charges on weekends when you told me you were at book club. You weren't as careful as you thought you were. If you knew, why didn't you say anything?" "Because I was waiting to see how far you'd go. And you went pretty far. Divorce papers at my retirement party, that was inspired. Really, I almost applauded." I could hear her breathing, ragged and angry. "You're a bastard." "I'm a bastard who owns the house you're living in. You have 32 days. After that, I'm changing the locks and anything left inside becomes my property. Have a nice evening, Linda." I hung up and poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon. The good stuff, not the cheap bottle I'd grabbed at the retirement party. Month 3 was when everything came together beautifully. Linda had moved in with Derek, just as I had predicted. Turned out his condo was even smaller than I'd thought, and having 2 additional adults living there had caused some tension. My PI reported frequent shouting matches. Derek apparently hadn't signed up for a ready-made family, especially one that came with expensive tastes and no money to fund them. Jennifer had taken a job as a barista, which she complained about constantly on her social media. Michael had finally admitted to his mother that he'd dropped out of school, which had led to more shouting and a temporary separation where he'd crashed on various friends' couches. The house sold for $1.8 million. I netted most of it after paying off the remaining mortgage. Added to my other holdings, my net worth was now comfortably in the 8-figure range. I kept living in my modest apartment, kept heating up my frozen dinners, kept watching baseball. But now I was doing it while looking at property listings in Montana and planning my actual retirement. The call came on a Tuesday evening. It was Jennifer. "Dad, can we talk?" I muted the television. "Sure." Mom wanted us to call you. She's too proud to do it herself." "What's wrong?" I asked, even though I knew exactly what was wrong. Things are really hard right now. The house sold, and Mom's share from the divorce settlement is almost gone. She spent too much on the remodeling before she had to move out, and the lawyer fees were more than she expected, and Derek's not working out." "I'm sorry to hear that." I meant absolutely none of it. "We were wondering if maybe you could help. Just temporarily. Maybe a loan or—" "No." The word hung in the air like smoke. "Dad, please, we're family." "We were family. Until you decided to turn my retirement party into a circus. Until you stood there and clapped while I signed away 23 years of marriage. Until you made it very clear that I was nothing but a wallet to all of you. That's not fair. We were hurt. You were never around. You missed everything important." "I was working.
I was providing for you. Every dance recital I missed paid for your dance lessons. Every basketball game I couldn't attend paid for your private school. Every late night at the office paid for your college education that you apparently didn't bother finishing. I heard her breath catch. You know about that? I know about everything, Jennifer. I know Michael dropped out. I know your mother was cheating. I know you lost your job and didn't tell anyone. I know exactly who my family is. The question is, do you? We made mistakes, she said, and now she was crying. We're sorry. Mom's sorry, even if she won't say it. Can't we just start over? No, I said again. You wanted me out of your life. You got your wish. Now live with it. Please, Dad, we need you. You need my money, I corrected. You never needed me. That was the whole problem. I hung up before she could respond. My hand was shaking slightly, and I hated that it was. Even after everything, some part of me still felt like the dad who'd missed those recitals and games. Some part of me still felt guilty. But then I remembered standing in that ballroom, surrounded by my colleagues, signing divorce papers while my children clapped, and the guilt evaporated like morning dew. The voicemails started the next day, first from Michael, then from Linda herself, all of them saying variations of the same thing. They were sorry, they made mistakes, they wanted to try again, they needed help, they missed me. I deleted each one without listening all the way through. A week later, I got an email from Linda. It was long, rambling, and desperate. She had broken up with Derek. She realized what she'd lost. She understood now that I had been providing for them all those years. She wanted another chance. She said she still loved me. That one made me laugh out loud.
I replied with a single sentence. You had your chance. You literally threw it at my head along with a champagne glass. The truth is, I could have helped them. $8 million is more money than I'll ever need. I could have paid off Jennifer's credit cards, covered Michael's rent, set Linda up in a decent apartment. I could have been the bigger person. But bigger people don't get served divorce papers at their retirement parties while their children applaud. Bigger people don't spend 3 years being cheated on while everyone around them knows except them. Bigger people don't have to watch their life's work get reduced to a punchline at their own celebration. I wasn't interested in being the bigger person anymore. I was interested in being the person who won. 3 months and 4 days after my retirement party, I got on a plane to Montana. I'd bought a ranch, 200 acres with a main house, a guest house, and a view that would make you believe in God if you didn't already. The nearest town was 40 minutes away. My nearest neighbor was 5 miles down the road. It was perfect. I settled into a routine, morning coffee on the porch, reading books I'd been meaning to read for 30 years, learning to fish, badly, occasionally consulting on accounting projects that interested me, just to keep my mind sharp. The money kept growing, almost in spite of me. Good investments have a way of doing that. The calls from my family eventually stopped. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Linda had moved to Florida to live with her sister. Jennifer had gotten a better job and was dating someone new. Michael had finally found direction and was training to be a personal fitness instructor. They were surviving, which was more than they deserved and less than they wanted. As for me, I was happy. Actually, genuinely happy. For the first time in years. I'd spent 2 decades building a life for people who didn't appreciate it, and now I was building a life for myself. Every sunrise was mine. Every decision was mine. Every dollar I spent was mine. Some people might say I should have been the bigger person, that I should have forgiven my family and helped them when they needed it, that revenge is hollow and forgiveness is noble. Those people didn't have their entire life implode in front of their colleagues while their children provided the soundtrack. You want to know the real kicker? The final twist to the knife? About 6 months after I moved to Montana, I got a letter from Jennifer. She'd found my address somehow. The letter was long, handwritten, and actually seemed sincere.
She apologized for everything, said she understood now how hard I'd worked, said she'd been selfish and cruel, said she hoped someday I could forgive them. At the end, she mentioned that she'd gotten engaged. She'd love for me to walk her down the aisle. She knew she didn't deserve it, but she was asking anyway. I read that letter 3 times. Then I put it in a drawer and didn't respond. Because here's the thing about revenge. It's not about being cruel. It's about boundaries. It's about saying you hurt me and there are consequences. It's about refusing to let people treat you like garbage and then welcome them back the moment it's convenient for them. My family made a choice when they turned my retirement into a spectacle. They chose humiliation over honesty, drama over decency. They wanted to hurt me in the most public way possible, and they succeeded. Now they get to live with that success. As for me, I'm sitting on my porch in Montana watching the sunset over mountains that don't care about divorce papers or retirement parties or families that implode. I've got a glass of bourbon, a good book, and absolutely nothing to apologize for. They wanted to know what they'd done when I signed those papers? They set me free. And that, as it turns out, was the best gift they ever gave me. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting free and building the life you actually deserve. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories reach, and honestly, it's wild to think people from all over the world are reading about Robert's journey from that disastrous retirement party to his peaceful ranch in Montana. Whether you're watching from New York, Nigeria, New Delhi, Pluto, the Milky Way, or anywhere in between, I want to hear from you. Your location helps me understand my audience better and reminds me that stories about standing up for yourself resonate everywhere, no matter the culture or country. So comment your city or country below. Let's see